Hey folks, Steve here with another Dark Valley video. Today we're going to be looking at turn 32, and unfortunately I have to make the guess that I'm not going to get to do many videos this week. I'm going to get this Thursday video done, and then tomorrow, if I'm lucky, I'll have the time to get another video done. So last week made for a good time to make a lot of videos due to special circumstances. I probably won't have those same circumstances this week, but we'll do what we can as usual, and we're getting through, it feels like in many ways the last legs of the game, but there's still, like 13 turns left, so we're still going to be at it for a while, no doubt about it. I will say, before we get into it too much, Ted had commented again that, really that Stavka reserve can be super powerful and very useful, and obviously I'm sitting here thinking, well, I haven't really made as much use of it as maybe I could be, and maybe it's just a cadence of like the action chits and what units I can get into the Stavka reserve, and it just hasn't worked out very well, because in my mind I would want to put the guard tank armies in reserve, and if I put 4 steps worth in Stavka reserve, I have to do it via rail, and that uses up all my rail capacity, and then they're going to add whatever combat factors where they can go to combat with the Stavka activation, and that could be useful, but if there's not a great place to attack, a weakened point in the line that attack could actually go with decent odds, then it doesn't do a whole lot for me. So I realize that, like, this is the issue that maybe is going to keep the Soviets from succeeding well, is my inability to figure out the best way to use the Stavka reserve. I don't know. But again, I think a really dramatic thing with where the game is at is that we didn't have a Stalingrad disaster as the axis. We didn't have a Kursk or post Operation Citadel disaster. Everything that has happened to the axis since really late 1942 has been middling damage, and they've managed to stay pretty healthy along the way. Their real gains as opposed to history was, they picked up Leningrad. They made a decent push on and got Voronezh, and didn't lose their marbles trying to take Stalingrad or Krasnodar or the Baku oil fields. I just relented on that, and I think that again that if I think about what was lost in historical terms to units on the board in those big disasters, I mean, the fact I haven't had to replace those losses, and then when the replacements that I am getting have helped top off the Axis position on the board, I think that it has been very powerful, very good position for the Axis to be in, because they're in much shipper shape than their historical counterparts, and the Soviets are trying their very level best to crack that line open. And again, I'll say, I might not be getting all the guys in the right places to be the most 100% effective, but this being somewhat of a long-running learning game, I'm definitely picking up things that's like, oh, well, if I was doing this from the beginning again, I would be doing things differently. And it's kind of too late now to try to change things up. I could try to say, well, let's restart the game at Operation Bagration, right, on turn 34. But I don't think I'm going to do that. I think we're going to keep playing the existing full campaign. And it could very well be an Axis victory right now. If I were to bet what would happen, it would be an Axis victory. But things can change, and they can change very quickly here. And we'll see what the chit recipe does to us as we get through the changes here. So this turn 32, is a mud turn. So as usual, the weather effects, -2 to Axis mech and motor, -1 to everybody else, and then you can see there's a lot of cases there aren't Zocs. There's not mechanized Zocs anyway. No forced march. Airdrops can happen, and -1 bombardment. Blah 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 blah. No mech Zoc and swamp. all that kind of stuff is pretty straightforward. We're kind of used to that by now. The reinforcements this turn actually are really sort of, I guess, in terms of volume, sided to the Axis. So the Soviets are going to get another artillery here that I have just placed right there, which for them, I mean, hey, this is great. We've got a lot of artillery now, and I'm not hitting every time with them, but even just those free step losses are important to keep up the strain on the Axis. But the Axis this turn get a lot of stuff. I mean, compared to what they normally get. So they're going to get 214 units. So just, whatever, that's fine. Not a big deal. We get another battalion. We get 2 SS divisions that are pretty strong, right? They're pretty strong, and then we get an upgrade for an existing unit to a full tank unit. And I think if I look on the board of where that unit is now, it's just Panzer Grenadier. It's a Panzer Grenadier unit. Now it's going to be an actual Panzer unit, and it's a pretty strong one too. A 7 combat factor. That is pretty significant. That's very powerful for the Axis at this point, right? It's not a 14 combat strength guard tank army, but it is pretty strong, and these extra steps that can be added may be really important. Now I'll have to decide, do I want them to be reserve armor units and fast reaction reserve force, or do I want to stuff them into the border somewhere? I'm not sure I have an answer for that yet. I'll have to think about it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to handle the reinforcements and replacements, and as far as those go, it's going to be the same as previous turns. Axis is getting 2 Panzer steps, 2 Panzer Grenadier steps, and then 4 motorized / infantry steps. The Soviets are going to get their boatload. And then what I'll do is I'll do the strategic redeployment stuff, and the rail movement and all that kind of stuff. We'll do that off camera, and when we come back, we'll be ready to look at the action chit recipe for the turn. It hasn't quite happened yet, but we're going to continue to see some issues for the Axis where their chit recipe is just not going to be very good, where the Soviets are going to get better. That won't really start to happen until after this turn, I think, if I remember right. Might be the turn after. Let me see. Okay. It starts to get much better in June of 44, which is still a couple turns away, yeah. So, all right, well, I'm going to take care of this, and then when we come back, we will start the action phase. Okay, so after fixing up our units and whatnot, we've got a little hefty Stavka reserve with a guard tank army, an assault army, and a infantry army, and a cav. And so how I got that is that the assault army and the regular army were in the dead pile. I rebuilt them in the Stavka Reserve, so that was like, I didn't have to rail them. I could just bring them back to life there. And then I railed a guard tank army that was on a rail line and a cav unit to be an exploit force where possible. So whether or not this is a good Stavka Reserve, I couldn't tell you, but that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 steps that I guess under really good circumstances we could make use of and hurt the Axis. That's the idea, right? So that's the best I could do for the moment. Everything else is more or less in okay shape. The reinforcements, I was able to get some units fixed up behind the front line, but rebuilding all those units and stuff actually took quite a bit of the Soviet replacement point total. And we still got some beat up guys on the front line I hadn't pulled back yet due to the chit order. So there's certainly, I've got to make some decision here with the action chits. Like, do I move and try to get things set up, or do I just go with, say, like combat Stavka Zhukov, do combat, and then hope that I can get some nice results out of it? Because we are, we're matched up on the line. We've got this whole little situation over here that we could, continue to cause problems for the Axis, where we, movement around here is a little congested due to the double lines there. And you know, right now the German mechanized units don't have Zocs, and I'll have to double check some of these stacks and see if maybe we actually can slip and slide around down here as the Soviets, and maybe even knock these guys out. I mean, the line kind of can extend down and protect, but if we knocked some of those units out, that would help out quite a bit. Um, excuse me, sorry about that. I did rail a core here to kind of help cover that gap in the line. Now we're getting into the Pripyat marshes, and now my holding space for all of my marker chits have to be moved out of the way because now we're stomping around in the swamp. And you know, there's a certain point it's like, well, do you go around the swamp? You got to project a little bit of force into the swamp, at least on the eastern edge, and then it just gets a lot harder for other units to kind of stay in there and stay in supply, or at least stay safe. So kind of not sure how to proceed with that. But the Soviets aren't going to have any problem because as they take that territory in the swamp, their supply lines are going to be extended from there because they're going to be tracing back to the rail line. So there are rail lines in the Pripyat marshes. So in theory, the Soviets are in pretty good shape if they are marching some dudes through there. Even if it's infantry, they can kind of help maintain the situation, I guess. It won't be totally free of units, though. Many Axis units are in not great position because there are mechanized units sort of in the swamp areas, in the marshes, and they're not going to perform well there. And it sort of just evolved out of the clear terrain getting pushed out of it. Now you're in bad terrain, and might have to see about moving things around. But terrain is going to start to matter again, where for a while, the lines were stagnant, and then we were playing around in the open, flat plains of Ukraine. Now we're back to having to worry about, what's the terrain like, how's that going to impact our mech combat factors and everything else. That might end up being an important factor as we get through this. So here is the action chit recipe for the turn. It is just like last turn, so the Axis has move or combat, 2 of those, and I'm putting the 4th Panzer HQ activation in to kind of help try to keep that whole area safe around beyond Minsk by the Pripyat marshes. The Soviets get their Stavka, move, combat Stavka, Zhukov, and deep battle with the logistics as usual. And so yeah, I think with the board position the way it is, I think I do maybe want to start with combat Stavka Zhukov. Ted had made a comment that opening with deep battle isn't a great idea. Opening with combat Stavka Zhukov is probably better if you're going to do combat, because then the deep battle can help you later in the turn, and that makes sense. So I think I did a turn where I did deep battle first, and that was kind of a waste. So, I think whoever wins this game of Dark Valley, it might just come down to which side did I play most incompetently. That might be the real... Not that I played one side better, it's just one side I played the least incompetently will win the games. That'll be the big deciding factor here. So, okay, I think that's what we're going to do. We're going to do the combat stuff, Kajuka. We're going to see what we can do. Importantly, it's going to allow our artillery to fire, and we want to take those steps off the front line of the Axis wherever possible. And then everything else that comes after will be a nice little mix-up here. Now, the Axis still actually technically has their emergency modal chit, and I can see some situations where they are going to look to use it. Only thing is, once they use it, it's gone. So, what situation is emergency enough to use it? That's what the Axis half of me has to decide. So, I'm going to take care of these combats here. We're going to put this chit up, and then when we come back, I will show the aftermath of those combats, just to show Zhukov is over here in this area, and Stavka is here, sort of supporting this region of the front, with a little bit of activity up here, mostly artillery just plinking away at guys since we can. So, okay, we'll be right back. Okay, well, here we are after combat Stavka Zhukov, and we have some potential here. Now, I tried to attack down here. I ended up getting a BL1. Not what I wanted, but that's what I got. And I tried a couple of places some -2 attacks that didn't work out so great. Now, I amazingly, on every artillery that I fired, I missed, which is a real bummer because I had some single-step or even two-step hexes that could have been hit and would have made things even better than they were. But I missed that opportunity, honestly, and so we managed to push through in a couple of spots right now, and that's looking really good in terms of the Zoc placement. And we actually have some units that are technically isolated or would be isolated when the logistics chit comes up. And so I like where we're at. I like where things are sitting there. And so what I need to figure out now is what to do next. And that, I guess, is the real question. We could try to do Stavka now and try to further support this push through, but I don't know. They would have to be I guess they could reinforce in a Gomel, but that's up here and it's a little congested and it's not a great position. So I don't know if it makes sense. They could pop into Bryansk up here and kind of choo-choo their way down using movement, but they're not going to get super duper far, which is a shame. I'm sort of realizing maybe this wasn't the best option. I think before we use Stavka, we have to get a Soviet move so I can get some guys arranged a little bit better to support more attacks and more Zoc positioning. So I think this was good. I think for the combat, we managed to break here, and this is really, honestly, where I want to break the line, because I want to just, cover here, maybe not even take Kiev, just drive south, and start causing a lot of issues for this extended Army Group Center, Army Group South, I should say, situation down here. So I'm going to load up the cup here, because I didn't do that, and we're going to see what we pull out here now. I wouldn't mind logistics coming up. I think that would be nice if we were able to do that, and then we could smash a out of supply stack on next combat, or I wouldn't mind getting the deep battle, and then we could potentially extend the pocket even more and cause problems. So we'll see what we get here. And the chit we pulled is logistics. Okay, well, this makes it really easy. These guys are isolated. And just to be clear, just so you see, like, right now with the mud, there are certain constraints around Zocs. So mech units don't have Zocs in Swamp. German mechanized units don't have Zocs. But our Soviets here are infantry anyhow, and they'd still have Zocs even if they were mech, just not in the swamp over here. And so that stack there is indeed out of supply. Now, it might not be terribly hard for the Axis to get them back into supply, mind you, and they could emergency withdraw out of that. But depending on what we draw next, we could seal the deal and have created a nice break in the line enough that we could actually look to exploit it a little bit better. So this is, I'm feeling pretty good. Now the other thing is now the time to use modal, and if I did, let's see, this wouldn't be a terribly bad time to try to do that. But once we use it, it's done. And it might come more in handy later down the road. We might still be able to recover from this. So I'm not going to use modal, and we will pull the next chit and hope for the best. And hope that it's a German move, I guess, is what the Axis is hoping for. So we pull, and it is Axis move or combat. I think move being the prudent activity here. Now, they've got a lot of movement that they need to make to have this be a useful move. But they're going to try, and we're going to try to get as many of these guys out as we can. We might have to just give up a stack rather than try to hold the present line. I'm not sure it makes sense to try to hold that line or not. We could move forward and sort of save. We could try. I think actually we can emergency withdraw some of these guys out. So I think we'll be okay, but this will be another major move back for the Axis that they're going to need to make here, and they might have to think about giving up Kharkov just to save the line. They're going to have to give up Kharkov probably. So I'll have to figure that out here. Movement's going to take a little bit until I can figure out how to cover the board here, but we'll worry about that when we come back. You'll see the situation. Okay, here we are after Axis movement. Now we couldn't totally disengage the entire way down the line. We actually still have a little bit of contact here, and the line is quite thin actually there. And I've sort of pulled back and I've shifted guys over a little bit, and I'm having to decide. I still actually have movement. I could take. He basically moved one hex, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I could do something like that and try to improve the situation a little bit. I think that maybe that's good. So yeah, so they pulled back. I pulled back over here. We got sort of out of that conundrum there, but obviously we're giving up some space. We are able to pull back. I've got some units back here that are now reserves, and they weren't going to have enough movement to get all the way over to the thinned out part of the line, but I've got some guys headed that way. And I even had some Hungarian units here in Kiev as sort of a guard force, and they're moving up to the line of support as well. Our isolated units are no longer isolated. They're still marked as such for supply purposes. And they're now behind a friendly line, but because they had to do the emergency withdrawal, they're actually behind the front line, which means they're not. They bugged out, but they're not ready to be on the front line until I can move them again. So there's a challenge here, and now I'm thinking maybe I should have picked 2nd Panzer for our HQ activation of the Axis, but such as it is. To answer the one question though that somebody had was saying, is moving just one hex back just the ultimate strategy? Well, I think the weakness, it's not a weakness, but like that isn't going to solve the Axis's problem forever. Like I'm doing it, and I'm doing it decently well, where it's advantageous to me. But I'm going to start to run out of the ability to make use of that, because once the line is further broken here, and I can't keep up the damage in that one spot, then the Soviets are going to be pulling down this way, and the one hex back here isn't going to help the fact there's guys back here. And so I'm going to have to do more. I'm going to have to scramble to get guys moved out. And the game that I'm playing with myself is how long can I do the one hex thing? Because there have been several points where I said I just need to pull everybody back. But I'm taking risk, and I'm saying, well, maybe I can hold on a little bit longer. I'll just do a little bit. I'll keep stepping back. But eventually, if the Soviets can get a strong enough breakout, they could swoop down and potentially cut a lot of these guys out of supply. And if they do that, then that whole army group, it could be destroyed. And so I'm kind of in that place now, and the Axis is starting to run out of good places to retreat back to. And we're going to get some benefit over here getting across the river, but due to these wide hexes, I mean you can't cross there. You have to cross at certain spots on the line, and there's going to be a traffic jam. I'm going to either cross through here a bunch of units, or they're going to have to go down this way and cross. And that whole time they're going to be dogged by Soviet forces. So it's an interesting conundrum, right? It's an interesting conundrum. Who's going to get trapped on the wrong side of the river maybe and have to deal with forces of unfun times, I guess I'd put it that way. And just so you guys see what I'm talking about, so like this part of the river is not even a river hex side, it's lake impassable hex side, I believe. Because there's minor river, there's major river, there's Volga, and then there are the lake impassable hex sides. And that's really what makes, there's over here, there's a couple of spots that are like that, like one hex side here, a couple over here, a few over here, and then all along here, it's like one wall of an issue. And I think the Soviets would be glad to get some of these Axis units stuck in front of the impassable hexes with nowhere to go, they're going to get either destroyed, or they're going to get um, isolated. And I don't think you can trace supply across those hex sides. That might be something, Ted, if you're watching, just to get clarity on. I should look here. They're impassable. Combat's not allowed. I'll have to see if I can trace supply across them. If I can't, then that's going to be a backboard for the Soviets here. That might prove very useful. Okay, so that's Axis movement complete. Again, they managed to do fairly well in that operation to move back. And I think what I'd really like is Soviet movement now would probably be ideal. But let's see what we get out of the cup. I don't think Stavka would help a whole lot here. I want to wait yet, but what do we get? Okay, Axis combat. There's actually a couple spots that are worth looking at for the Axis combat, so I'm going to take myself off camera and evaluate that. It's really going to be obviously starting here up the line. There might be a couple spots. If I think I can cleanly get away with an attack, I'm going to try it, because the Soviets have lost a lot of their air. They've used up a lot of their air assets right now, and this would help, knock back the Soviets just a little bit, just to keep them, having to spend recovery points, replacement points on guys rebuilding. Because even the Soviet line here is not it's not solid. There's actually some gaps there because units have been moving around, dying, and everything else. So we'll see. We'll be right back. Okay, I reviewed it, and the Axis couldn't really do any combats that I found worthwhile. That would be worth the potential risk. So we're just going to go to the cup, and I think for the part of the Soviets, they really would rather have it be movement here, because if it's deep battle, they just aren't in the perfect right position to do a lot of damage here, and even Stavka is not going to fix that for them, because we just don't have enough space. I'm trying to think, if I left, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, we wouldn't even get to the front line if we left Bryansk. And with Stalino, we could maybe get somewhere, but I don't think we would have enough combat factors for it to really matter. We'd maybe get to attack with 24 combat factors. Yeah, I don't know that that's going to be... I'm telling you, I'm having trouble figuring out the Stavka reserve cadence here. I think we've got problems. Even going into Gomel, the swamp is what makes it really hard to make gains here. And all the terrain bonuses. So I don't know. I don't know what I can do. We're going to pull the chit, and we'll see what happens, I guess. And it is movement. Okay. This is good for the Soviets. They can get primed, and what I'm going to have to do is maximize as best as possible the combat factors for potential combats that would be of most value, I guess, across the board. Now, our challenge is we've still got issues of, it's got to be where Stavka and Zhukov is for it to really matter for deep battle, and it's probably going to be Stavka that we utilize. But we can get into position, and that's the important thing. So I'm going to hit pause here. I'm going to get the Soviets in line for the next attack, which will be coming here. The only other chit in the cup is the HQ activation, and I don't think there's much that can be done with that HQ activation at the moment. So yeah, I think we're good for the moment. So we'll be right back. Okay, here we are after Soviet movement. So you can see we've got, the gap filled. Now I've got some of our weakened units pulled back. I'm starting to move our artillery since I'm moving Stavka down. These artillery are going to be out of range, so they're not going to be useful. I'm going to bring them down south. So we've got a couple along the way that are coming, and they're going to help ensure that we keep pounding down this way. maybe another turn or two before they're really useful down this way. But again, we'll keep moving Stavka around a little bit to activate what we need to activate along the line. But right now, we moved them over this way, so we just have even more firepower fighting this way. Really, is I need to pull this way with a slight arc to the left, because what we want to do is try to make sure that even as these guys pull back, we're staying ahead of them. And if I can get down to eventually down to Odessa, or at least create the situation where it's there's units scattered all about here, we will have an easier time doing localized isolations and smacking them. So that's going to be the important piece here. So I think that's what we needed to do. I think we're in good shape there. I'm going to pull the next chit, and it is 4th Panzer. Now, is the 4th Panzer in range to do much more than it already has? I'm going to move the HQ itself a bit. So that way, well, I guess I don't need to move it down that much. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, 3. Okay. What I'm trying to do is make sure that the HQs have some overlap a little bit, the axis ones, so that we can try to move units around down here, because we see the concentration of firepower / I'm reading my own mind. Okay, so that means that the final activation here that is not already Stavka, or rather Stavka sort of waiting, is deep battle. And so, yeah, we're going to do deep battle, and as I just validate what our real options are here, it's still not time where we can activate both HQs. But we can activate Stavka, and I think that's what we want to do. So we've got this whole area here that's going to activate. And then what's going to happen is, if it makes sense for Stavka, we'll activate Stavka. We'll have them go into Gamel up here, but we'll have them come out of Gamel and try to swing through if they can. My problem is the next reinforcement city of value is Kharkov over here, and it's on the front line, but we need to take it for it to be valuable. Alternatively, depending on how the combats go, I could possibly pick Stalino over here, or Rostov, and be able to make something happen there as well. So we have some options. It's just they're kind of limited in what we think we're going to be able to do here. So we'll be right back. Okay, well, I did the deep battle, and we didn't get very far. Not as far as I would have wanted. For all the good that it did me, I managed to hit a couple of times with artillery, and on the attacks, I just getting 3-to-1 or 4-to-1 odds is okay, but a lot of the time we're just getting BL1 results, and that's not enough to clear a hex. And in some cases, I'd rather it be a DR, but we couldn't quite get to the EX results that we really would have wanted, and so I did some attacks. I used the movement to shuffle back some of our injured units, and then I did use Stavka, and I placed a couple units in Gamel, and I moved the cavalry down a little bit, just so that we at least are getting some units back on the board. And I've kept a regular infantry army and a guard tank army in the reserve for next turn, and we'll look to get guys situated a little bit better for what's going to happen next. We should have more guard tank armies in the Stavka Reserve next turn, which will be the important piece. We do want those guys to be situated on rail lines so that I can pull them back and take them where they need to go. And I think we'll do better next turn. So it's just this turn wasn't great. We didn't quite do all the things that we wanted to be able to do as the Soviets, but we're working on the Axis. That's the important thing, I guess. Now, just to do this properly, these guys are out of supply. They're not isolated anymore when we get to the isolation phase. And we're still sitting where we're sitting. So I think if I was right, I think we're still at 30 victory points. Not that it matters too much right now. We're kind of way behind the time it would matter for counting for victory. And again, the Soviets need to just keep hitting that line, the same place over and over again, trying to knock things loose, and we just haven't been able to do that very well. I will say, like, I've worked very hard to ensure that the Axis has a good, like, 8 combat factors in a lot of hexes, and 8 is kind of hard to get. Like, you really do have to have had a lot of concentration of firepower. We're going to have that down here, but we need to use our replacements to get our guard forces back to the best shape they can be in, to actually, get multiple times 8 to be attacking at 3-to-1 odds or greater. We still need 3-to-1 odds or greater, or else we're much too likely to get AL1 results due to re-rolling no effects. So it's very difficult. Now, our air power is helping a lot, but the reality is, even dumping the 4, if I dumped 4 air support points into a combat, that's going to make a big difference sometimes, but we still only have, 12, air points per turn at this point, so that gets used up quickly if we're really diving deep. So for every time, we've managed to do some damage, the Axis can adjust their way out of it. Now, just looking ahead at what's to come, what we're going to have soon is that in June, the Axis is going to lose the ore, so they're only going to get, whenever their move comes is when they come, for a while, for the summer, and I suspect that's illustrating, the lack of oil, potentially, I don't know. And then in September, they're going to get some movement back, and then in the winter, they're going to slow down again, and it's really the odds of them pulling a movement shit when it suits them that's going to matter. And then, in addition, the Soviet activity chits are going to change a little bit. But we're still behind schedules, the Soviets, big time. And if, we, to be on time, we will have needed to be way over here off screen in the south to be in line with Operation Bagration, and we are definitely not at that point. So we'll have to see how it goes, guys. Tomorrow, or when I next get the opportunity, we'll look at doing turn 33, but this was turn 32. We will see you in the next one. I do want to make a call out that apparently this video, or one of the past videos, got mentioned on the No Enemies Here podcast, or video channel, I don't know. I managed to find that, and that was kind of cool to get a call out amongst the dozens of other people that they do commenting on there. So if you haven't checked out No Enemies Here, go punch that in YouTube and check them out, I guess. We'll return the favor. And until next time, guys, take care and keep on gaming.